Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Max Frequency Podcast. I'm your host, Max Roberts, and I am joined this time. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by John Linneman from Digital Foundry. Hi, John. How are you?
Why, hello there, Max. Thanks for having me on today. I'm excited to be here because, I like what you're doing over there with the podcast. I listened to it recently with Corey.
Yeah.
On there from My Life in Gaming, good friend of both of ours, I guess, So, yeah, it's my turn now.
It is. It feels like a long time because I asked you to be on the show right before I had to go on a work trip, which probably wasn't the smartest thing on my end. And then you had Gamescom and a trip to Japan. So it's not been the best time so far. So now, right before probably one of the busiest Octobers in a long time, I've been able to get you on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Absolutely, my friend. I'm happy to be here. So let's get into it.
Yeah. In digging into you and your work, I've been watching, gosh, I don't know how long I've been watching Digital Foundry. It feels like a very long time. But your voice has always been a constant that I've been listening to. And it makes sense because you started back in May of 2013. So it's been 10 years. Which happy anniversary for you. That's a long time.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it has been a long time.
And I noticed that it seemed, at least the first article, I couldn't even find a video. So I guess it was an art of the Puppeteer, a tech analysis.
Yeah, I can explain that. It's simple. I mean, when I joined DF, we weren't really doing videos like this, right? You remember the turn of phrase pivot to video that was all the rage during that era? Well, that's kind of what I helped do in 2015 was, it's time to pivot to video. Richard wanted to do it as well, and we just did it. But before that, everything was mostly just articles written out with supporting video files, as in just, here's the raw data in a video, check it out. Not very interesting, but it shows the work, so to speak, right? Like the real meat was in the article.
Which is so interesting to think of that was how very technical information was covered instead of it just being a video. Because when you think of a frame rate analysis or resolution or pixel counting or whatever you were doing, reading about it doesn't sound like the logical place to dig into it.
Well, I mean, the internet was a different place back then, I would say.
Yeah.
And like consuming video content, especially high fidelity content, it wasn't very good on YouTube, I would say. In fact, most of the videos we did post during that era were hosted locally on Eurogamer servers because we could actually spit out higher quality video files through that on-site player as opposed to YouTube itself, which, that was useful for us. But I mean, that's just how it was. That's how Richard started it when he really kicked off the whole DF thing. Although DF itself started out as something else first before it turned into this sort of game tech analysis, whatever it is now kind of channel. But yeah, it was pretty much just a site-based thing that you read about. And I was a fan, by the way. I read Digital Foundry. That's the whole reason I'm here, really. It's like, I like this stuff. And it resonated because this was the kind of stuff I was actually doing on my own or with a friend of mine, where we would load up games across multiple formats and just compare. Including especially the retro stuff, actually. We would have multiple CRTs out and just like hooking up all this stuff and like literally directly comparing it in real time. And I love doing that stuff. And I always have. And so it was a natural fit.
It does. It sounds like it. I don't remember when you specifically shared this. There was the first video on your YouTube channel. You recently, I think, tweeted about it, and recently could be months. I don't know. But it was Project Gotham Racing loading times. And it's just this pure video of just, this is how long it takes for this game to load. And it's distilled Digital Foundry.
Yeah. So I can't remember the exact circumstances, but I suspect I was in a conversation on a message board, probably NeoGAF, or if it was just regular GAF back then, I don't know. But we were probably talking about loading times, and I probably made a point about it and filmed it, and it was like, here, this is how long it takes for the full grid of cars.
Yeah, the
'cause I remember
description is
being
just-
annoyed by that. Yeah, exactly. The description is just PGR3 loading times.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's and I watch it. It's a minute and 10 seconds just because it's so goofy. I'm thinking about it today in today's context of the SSD and a game like God of War Ragnarok loads in like 2 seconds, and it's so much more detailed and larger than Project Gotham Racing. Or comparing it to a car game, I haven't played Forza Horizon yet. But if it's anything like Gran Turismo 7 in regards to load times, I mean, it's pretty.
you mean
incredible.
Forza Motorsport, not
yes.
Horizon?
Correct. Forza Motorsport.
It's actually noticeably slower than
Is
Gran
it?
Turismo 7, but it's still pretty fast, I would say.
Okay.
Perfectly acceptable, but not like instant like GT7 is.
But it's pretty
hey,
crazy still.
They're both real fast compared to prior games, I would say. Honestly, PS3 360, that era was one of the worst for loading times outside of the old floppy disk days or the tape cassette days.
Mm-hmm.
That was bad. That was real bad, that era. Loading times were not good in so many games.
Yeah, it was. They were weren't they reading off the disc, and then sometimes they could install a hard drive.
There was a bit of that, but it's just by that point, the amount of memory in those consoles grew to be too much, where you couldn't actually pull the data off the disc fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like the PS2 era, loading times, even though people sometimes complain, they actually not very long in most cases. Most games load pretty quick, I would say, and it's also true of PlayStation Saturn era as well. Loading times are not that long. They're slower than cartridges, but they're really not that long. Mm. It really was this PS3 era when you're having to fill like 256 megs of system RAM or 512 total on the 360. It takes a long time if you're running off an optical disc.
Yeah, I'm kind of it's similar-ish in this vein of thinking about it from 10 years ago, where things were running off the Blu-ray discs and hard drives and loading and things like that. Games
and
were running
DVDs,
like
on
the 360. That's right. Yep. I always forget that. But it feels like things have changed a lot, and maybe they haven't. Maybe they've been like this on PC for a lot longer, because it feels like things trickle down just from PC specs to the consumer level on consoles. But a lot of things have changed on the tech front, and I've imagined have increased the scope of what you have to know about and cover when you're looking at a game for Digital Foundry, from resolutions to now we've got ray tracing and loading and sound and frame rate ranges out the wazoo right now with VRR being in the mix. So things are fluctuating, but being covered up. Like, I'm curious how you stay on top of it, because I feel like it's a lot for me to read about and learn about, but you have to almost be an expert in a way, or at least know who to ask to find out.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It's a challenging situation, especially because our coverage has changed. When Digital Foundry first started, it really was just mostly about the resolution and the frame rate, right? That was the main thing. And it hasn't been that way for a long time. We started shifting away from that back when I was pretty new and we were still doing articles. I remember doing those big pieces on like the Order 1886. I did one for Rise, Son of Rome, where you kind of look more closely at the visuals themselves beyond just the resolution and frame rate. And, with modern games, that stuff I think has become largely irrelevant in many cases, although with the rise of Unreal Engine 5 and its heavy demands, we're starting to see some pretty low resolutions again. So maybe resolution is becoming slightly more important again. But I have to keep up. All of us, we have to keep up with just like what's going on, and that requires reading a lot of white papers, like looking at all the GDC and SIGGRAPH presentations that developers are giving, talking to developers wherever we can. The ones that are open, we can ask some questions. I dabble a lot still in Unreal Engine myself, just to familiarize myself with how certain things work and kind of gain an understanding of what it takes to do certain things. Although I'm not building large scale projects, mind you, just small things, but it gives you an idea of how certain things are implemented or the performance costs or what it takes to make this work. And trying to take all that knowledge and then distill it down into an entertaining video presentation. It's really hard. I try my best. I think, it's tough. You know, I do what I can, but I feel like I'm not doing enough, but I try to get all that information in there without it being too much, because it's not a tech presentation. And furthermore, in a lot of cases, we're still have to hypothesize things because we don't, especially pre-release, we don't have access to all this information, right? They haven't shared how things are done yet. So you kind of have to look at other things and kind of extrapolate from what one developer, a certain type of technique is using, and figure it out from there. Or you just get used to certain telltale signs of like, oh yeah, this type of effect or this style of reflection or this type of thing looks a certain way that is reminiscent of this other thing, and it sends you down that road. So
yeah,
there is a lot of research that goes into writing the scripts, I would say, in many cases.
I was just thinking about, because you mentioned Unreal, but then my brain started going to proprietary engines, in-house engines.
Yep.
And that's got to be even more guesswork. So my brain, as I'm a huge fan of Naughty Dog's games, I've read a lot, done a lot of research and things. And so my brain goes to, how do you dig into that? And I guess you're looking at previous releases. So The Last of Us Part 1 comes out, right? So then you're looking back at Part 2 and Uncharted 4, and I guess you're
sort of, yeah, but there's also just you can see, even if you don't understand how something is done yet, you can still point it out and recognize, oh, this thing that they're doing here is really interesting and or impressive. And even if we don't yet know how they've accomplished it, it's worth pointing out and basically highlighting it for the viewers to say like, okay, take note of this thing because this is actually really interesting. And here's why it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Even if you can't explain how it's doing it or why it's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. In a proprietary engine in a pre-release state, you can hypothesize and point stuff out, but you won't necessarily know 100% how it works. I mean, and usually, you know, I've gotten I think one of the better examples is, remember the Spider-Man Puddlegate?
Yes,
in 2018, right? I was happy to learn that I laid out my hypothesis of what was happening, and then I think quite some time later in a presentation, somebody from Insomniac confirmed that it was exactly right. So I was happy.
I feel like that's a thing that, does this happen a lot when you go back to, say, a GDC presentation about a game years later, where the developer's finally opening up about, well, this is how we did certain puddles and reflections or ray tracing in Spider-Man. You know, that was 2018 was Spider-Man?
Yeah, that would have been the PS4 one.
Right. So say there's a GDC talk about that years later. Is that something then you go back, you'll end up watching and retroactively realizing?
Absolutely. I love to go back and watch those.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting ones recently was actually Final Fantasy 16, because they were doing something really wild with the shadows. They kind of behaved like ray traced shadows, but at other times they didn't. And I was like, wait, are they using ray tracing or not? Like, what are they doing? Mm-hmm. And it was some really weird, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's not actually ray traced shadows, but they're doing something to allow them to produce close range shadows on characters and stuff that actually behaves a lot like a ray traced shadow would. So they get this super fine shadows on, like, you know, small details on the character model. So, you know, and they finally shared a whole presentation just about that, which was great.
That's so cool. That sounds so niche, right? To dig into just the way a shadow works in Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
But it also sounds really cool from a tech perspective by not tapping into ray tracing, which is, I would imagine, more technically expensive. Like taxing.
Not always.
Okay.
Absolutely. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not. It usually is more expensive, but there are certain operations. where one example, if we're still talking Spider-Man, it's fresh in my brain since I just covered that. In Spider-Man 2, for instance, in my video, there was a section about building interiors. So they did this wild thing where if you look inside any of the skyscrapers, like the buildings or the rooms inside the buildings have actual 3D space now.
Okay.
Before it was just a cube. It was just a cube map, right? So it was a flat texture that was designed to be decorated like it was an interior. It was basically a projected cube map inside the buildings. And it was a clever parallaxing trick, but you could tell the limitations pretty easily. Where here it's like you look at every room and not only are they actually moderately detailed, but there's sometimes animated characters inside the rooms, and the shadows from outside the room are projected perfectly into the room, like exceptionally clear. And you're just like, what the heck? Like, how are they doing this? But if you look really closely, you can actually spot some artifacts. And I noticed, wait a minute, there's like these checkerboard style patterns inside there, which look a lot like the same checkerboard pattern with the ray traced reflections, right? Uh-huh. So what I think they're doing there is actually drawing these rooms in the BVH structure, the acceleration structure, which is where, they would trace the rays into, right? That's how ray tracing is feasible. They're using like a facsimile of whatever the scene is, like the whole city world, and trace into that. And it's simplified versus what you actually see. I think they're tracing into boxes that are then projected onto the textures on the sides of the buildings. And I think that's actually faster in this case because if they were to actually do real shadow maps and all the stuff through transparent glass and all that geometry rendered, I think it would be super freaking expensive in the more traditional way, like using like portals and stuff like that. So I think by using the ray tracing features that they already have implemented for reflections, they found a really fast way to create the illusion of there being real rooms behind all the glass.
That sounds dope.
That's a case where I think ray tracing is faster than, some traditional rasterized techniques, which that rules. I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's so neat. And it's interesting to see what, in the context of Spider-Man, which at least Spider-Man 2, at least at this time, is a PS5 only game. I imagine within 2 years it will come to PC, which seems to be the current cadence for PlayStation exclusives, maybe even less time. I think Horizon was only 18 months or so. But it's interesting to see what they come up with to work within the limitations of the console hardware, which are, at least currently for PlayStation, are all the same across the board until some sort of pro model comes out, given the rumors.
Exactly.
So it's cool to see what they come up with within these restrictions, which is crazy to think about restrictions for what are we, 4 years into the console's life cycle?
But it's 20. It was 2020, but it's just with the way hardware is and what they're trying to do. There's always going to be limitations, but a lot of the best stuff comes from working around those limitations.
So another aspect of your work at Digital Foundry is like the whole retro. It feels like the whole retro section, DF Retro, is very John Linneman.
That's mostly me. Right.
It's John's baby.
Alex likes to dip his toes in there with some time capsule PC stuff, which is awesome. But
I like those.
I convinced him to get back into the CRT game, and I think he's very happy.
Everyone should come back to the CRT game. Let's keep them alive.
I agree.
So, in looking at this, because I've been, when the new ones come out and stuff, but I don't remember watching DF Retro from the beginning. So I went back to find out what the beginning was, and it seems to have been Quake on Saturn, which is a port. But then a little digging deeper, you actually had like the port corner with what was that game called? Hexen on your own channel.
Saturn.
Yes. So clearly a lot of love for the Saturn here in the early, what would become DF Retro and then is DF Retro. And it was like a 5-minute video. But today, a DF Retro video is an hour, if not longer. And you said in the beginning of the Quake one, it's a great way to archive clean, direct footage from classic games running on real hardware.
Yes.
But now it's so much more than that, with you filming the products and magazines and CRT shots and giving like deeper historical context for the game you're covering and why it is the way it is and what that means and implications later on. So you're basically a documentarian.
That's my goal anyway. Yes.
How there's so many questions of, from how you capture it, which I want to talk about a little bit later, to just how do you sit down and you plan out a video? Like you're like, I want to cover this. And it seems to me to balloon up to way larger than I would imagine. I love it. I love watching it. But how do you just approach a DF retro video?
Yeah, it has actually kind of changed because it did start out fairly simple and focus on like single games, and but yeah, now it's more when I talk about something, it's mainly because I'm also obviously very interested in that topic, and once I start researching, or if I already have knowledge from prior research, there's just so much there, and I find that stuff so interesting. And my idea is like when I talk about a game series, a type of game, whatever topic, I want to take the viewer on a journey to try to help them experience that feeling of being there at the time and sort of recreate some of the emotions around it, build the ephemera, if you will, around it. And then eventually it's like, all right, once you've got that, it's like, now we need to go into like the nitty gritty about the game itself. And then we look at the versions, and I just want to be this like I want to provide a complete experience to answer all the questions that I would want answered about certain topics, basically. Like, the Road Rash video, which I spent way too long making for a couple different reasons. That'll come out in public soon. I know, it's just Richard waits because of scheduling, and I haven't had time to do more big DF retros, but that started out as like a simple thing. Like, yeah, this won't be too much. And then it just kept growing. Like the more I investigated this stuff and the more I really dug into and it turned into this whole retrospective looking back at like the grunge scene in Seattle and like kind of comparing that to how the rise of EA on the Sega Genesis with their yellow tab. And I kind of tried to link the two together where it's like EA rebelling against the publishing giant Sega, which is funny to say from 2023, of course. But at the time, EA was smaller, and that was like their way of rebelling and doing something different with their unlicensed or not truly licensed, games in the Genesis. And tried to like link all this stuff together, like the attitude of the grunge era and like EA's play into the Genesis space, and then what eventually gave rise to Road Rash. And then that loops back around when you get to the 3DO era, and like all those kind of like bands come together within Road Rash in Road Rash 94, and like the whole aesthetic, it's just like this perfect fusion of all that stuff. And and then eventually you got to take people through the whole thing into the 90s as the series changed and shifted, and explore why. I mean, I get into some of the 3DO history itself and why it is the way it is, and what they were trying to do there. And it just becomes this whole story thing. Cause if I just jump like, oh yeah, and then Road Rash came out for the 3DO, and I start talking about it, I also want to provide the context of like what the 3DO is, but also more like why is it interesting? Put what was going on at the time. I want to put people in the headspace of it. It's not just about saying this is what the 3DO is. It's about this is what it was like to be around at that time when those games were coming out, and try to create that. Not that you needed to be. You can still do awesome stuff without actually being there. But I do like to leverage my own memories as well as, data that I've since learned to create that experience. And I don't know, I find that stuff really fun to make myself. And I think people like it. So that makes me happy.
I like it. So you at least know one person does. I think context is so vital to understanding the why and the how of something. I have a journalism degree, so naturally just telling the story and getting to the truth of something is built into the way I am. But, the 3DO is a really interesting example just because it was this console that was trying to do something different, and I honestly don't know a whole ton about it. I just bought my own 3DO actually because of Way of the Warrior, Naughty Dog again, and I picked up a copy of that was super clean and was like, well, now I need a way to play it. So I'm excited to dig into that and learn even more about it. But then you understand that what consoles were doing and what markets were they trying to tackle or features they were trying to leverage. Another game that I just learned was a 3DO game. Was this the Plumbers? Was it Plumbers Don't Wear Ties?
Oh, yes. The infamous one.
But I just learned about that because Limited Run is doing a re-release of it.
I know. I'm in the documentary.
I saw you in the trailer.
And my good buddy Audie is one of the main producers on that. So, yes, I can't believe that exists.
See, but I feel like if you just look at this is a really bad game, really cheesy, bad type of game at the time, and you just without the context of why it is the way it is, how it entered into this meme pop culture state, with things like the Angry Video Game Nerd, which then I was watching that video, so it's like my own rabbit hole journey. I think context is very important, so I appreciate that you take the time to take a viewer on there, because you could just throw up, this is what Road Rash looks like on the Genesis, this is what it looks like on the 3DO, and so on and so forth. But you even go into the book, the novelization of it, which I think is really silly. So
yes,
context is important. Right. I like it. Keep it up.
Thank you. That's what makes it worth doing for me, at least, because I love going through that stuff as well. Because I learn a lot of things while researching this stuff as well, and I just like to go down these deep rabbit holes, and I love that stuff. So it's just me sharing what I find interesting about game history, basically.
Do you ever have to pull yourself out of the rabbit hole and go, I can't go that deep for this video? Or do you just go as deep as you end up going?
I'm actually trying to work to reduce to pull back a little bit in some ways. It doesn't always work, but like I think I realized it was a little bit of a different project, but there was a time when I was like, you know what? I should just do a video covering all the games that were 1080p on the PS3. That would be fun.
The PS triple, baby.
I actually thought this would be a pretty easy video, but then because I was like, oh yeah, Beyond 3D has a list of games that are 1080p, except for it turns out that list hasn't been updated very much for a while, and it was great, but it's missing so much. So it turned out there was a lot more games than I expected that were 1080p, and the figuring out all of them, like I probably missed some, but the amount of work I did to like try to figure stuff out was super time consuming. And I think I ended up covering 88 games in one video. Oh my god! And it was all like 4 hours long.
I remember that.
That went way too long, and I should have known better, but I was happy I did it because it turned out to be a very fun rabbit hole to go down. But my goodness, that was definitely one where I was like, yeah, I may have gone too far this time.
May have.
Trying to cover 88 games in a video and also doing things like frame rate analysis and version comparisons on every one of them. It really was like making 88s. If I look back on my early DF videos from like 2015, when I was actually doing videos, it was literally like doing 88 of those in one video.
Oh my goodness gracious. It is. And no, Rich wasn't like, maybe this is too much.
Well, he supported that one, and he actually helped me capture a few of them, which is great. Get some frame rate data where I needed it. So it was, awesome. It was the PS Triple. We had to go all the way.
That's the only way to go for the PS Triple.
For Chad Daddy, what are you going to do?
Well, speaking of the PS Triple and capturing 1080p games and stuff, I was telling you, and listeners will know that I just had Try and Corey on from My Life in Gaming, back-to-back episodes, and, talked about their setups and all that stuff. And your setup is quite the thing. I was trying to analyze this picture that you shared of the Tink 4K and how you were matching the brightness with your CRT and your BBM and stuff. And I was trying to figure out what you had and all this stuff. And What was this? I spy. I wrote it down. There's a lot of consoles in here. I see like an analog NT and the Wii U. I assume there's a Switch dock somewhere, and your Tower of Power with the Genesis.
You can't see the Switch dock because it's on the other wall to the left of the modern TV.
Okay,
up where the controllers sit.
I see a PS1 and your Xbox and all this stuff. So you have quite the setup, but it's
just one of the setups too. That's the thing. I got 3 or 4 setups in the house. My wife does not like that, but she tolerates it.
My wife didn't really care for it either when we were in our apartment, because I had everything in the office and some stuff out in the living room. But now I have a detached garage I've turned into the office and game room. So everything except her Switch and dock is out here. So I have a dock in the house and then everything else outside, which is nice. It's been pretty great. But capture is so vital to what you do. And, and I've just rewired everything. I'm preparing the way for the Tink 4K. I just got like an Extron switch and all that stuff. But like, how do you do it? Because I feel like your setup has to be so complicated, maybe not the right word, but there's got to be a lot of stuff going on.
I tried to make it pretty elegant. It's not as complex as Corey, who has more space than I do, and the man just went insane. And I love his setup. It's great.
Yeah.
So the main thing is I kind of have to split it between modern consoles and retro consoles. Okay. They're both important to capture, and they kind of work a little differently. So I guess you could say, let's see here. So the heart of everything really is my AV receiver, because that splits out all the HDMI inputs, or that accepts all the HDMI inputs and sends it to where I need it to. So that, I guess you could say, so I'll actually start at that end of the chain. So you get the AV receiver. It has multiple outputs on it. One of them goes to my main TV. The other runs to an Atomos Ninja 5, which then has its own output, which then runs into one of my PC capture cards, which then has its own output, which then runs into another sort of a preview monitor as well. So that's all. So basically, everything gets fed into the receiver, and then it's fed through those multiple capture devices. And I can capture either on my PC, which is what I need for frame rate analysis, or just directly on the Ninja 5 if I just want B-roll. So it's all about piping it there.
The Ninja 5 captures video? I'm looking at it right now.
Absolutely. Like that's what it does. It's like a little screen.
Yeah.
It's got HDMI input and output, and you use SSDs in the back. You slide them in, and you just capture in ProRes, which is perfect for editing.
Oh my gosh, this seems amazing. Oh no. That seems really... So does the AV receiver, it does simultaneous output then? Would be the way you do it.
Yes. It has zone 1, zone 2, and like a third just like secondary output. So you can output 3 different you can clone the signal basically 3 times if you want. Just from the AV receiver.
Okay. That feels like it answers one of my questions like that I've had that I was thinking about, which was how do you tap into using modern features like VRR or black frame insertion or something like that without messing up the capture end of it?
Well, that's because this AV receiver, the way it works is that, it automatically limits the input based on what current displays are turned on. So when I fire up the receiver in my OLED TV and leave the Ninja 5 turned off, I get full HDMI 2.1, 120 hertz, 4K, VRR, all that. As soon as I turn on the Ninja 5, however, the receiver knows that, and that then sends a signal to the device. So like if I got a PS5 just running, VRR is on everything, turn on the Ninja 5, it'll literally instantly switch back to an HDMI 2.0 mode. So like the PS5 then changes itself to be just 4K 60, VRR goes off, all that stuff, right? And it's all automatic based on which monitors are turned on. So basically anytime I need to capture, I just turn on the Ninja 5 and everything just sort of jumps over to work properly. right? It just like downgrades the signal output to be what it needs to be for the capture device. And when I turn it back off, everything goes back. And that's thankfully the console's auto detect. It used to be more annoying with the PlayStation 4 because it would always reset itself and you had to go in every time and manually choose the settings. But with the new consoles, they're pretty good about not doing that. So, they just kind of adjust themselves based on what the receiver's telling them. Because basically when I turn on the Ninja 5, then the AV receiver is basically reporting that, hey, I can't do HDMI 2.1 right now. And the console then would know that, and it'll see that, oh, this thing doesn't support HDMI 2.1, so it sends the lower signal.
Gotcha.
Right?
That's so smart.
But it's pretty elegant now, I think. So I don't have to do any fiddling or cable changing or anything.
So then what about your retro stuff?
So then that also feeds into the AV receiver by way of the Tink 4K right now, which is I'm still using. I'm using a prototype unit at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And to get to that, so I have a G SCART SW and a G Comp as well. And you know, with my shelf, I don't have every console on it. I have some upstairs as well, but I have most of the consoles I would care about on that setup. And they're either running SCART or they're running component. And it goes to one of those. From there, then, the output splits. So for the SCART, G-SCART, of course, has dual SCART outputs. I have the older one, so it has a DE15 output and a full-size SCART.
Okay.
And the way I split that is the full-size SCART goes straight to my B&O, the Bang & Olufsen screen that I recently added. It's because that just has direct SCART input, so that's just SCART to SCART. Okay. For the BVM and the Tink, however, I have I got a small version of one of the Extron distribution amps. I didn't want the gigantic one because it takes up so much space, so I found a smaller one that they sell, and I run the DE15 from the G-SCART into the Extron, and then the Extron then outputs to both the BVM and then to the Tink 4K.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you can get it on the CRTs or the BVM and onto the OLED. And
on the Tink, I'm actually not using the SCART input now. I'm actually using a BNC to HD or whatever, the DE15 connector. So it's like the VGA style plug. So I have a cable that runs that to that. And that, talking with Bob and all them, I actually wanted to make sure of this because with the way a BNC is, like sometimes it's like the voltages or whatever, it can be a little bit too high. Things are, depending on what it's intended for, and the Extron does a good job at sort of regulating all of that and sending out a signal that's safe for the RetroTink. As those pro monitors, you can send some crazy stuff into them and they're fine, but like more consumerish hardware, you can fry it if you're not careful. So the Extron device does exactly that, and it sends a nice clean signal to the Tink 4K, which then outputs its own thing for HDMI, which, you know, for capture. And then so I have both of those CRTs running, and if I wanted, and I've done it before, I can then daisy chain more CRTs in via BNC on the Pro monitor, or also through the last Extron output. But I don't have enough room here for that, so I only have the two CRTs currently, and I think that's enough.
Yeah.
And component video works similarly, where I actually don't send component video to the B&O because that does not support component. That's RGB SCART only, and I've not found a way. I haven't actually bothered with it because it's fine. If I'm using component video, it's usually sending it to the Tink and then the BVM, and that's fine anyway. So, right.
That is, I love it. Because I just, with the Extron that I got, and I got an 8.4, so it's got 8. I have components, so just up to 8 component in, and I think 4 out. And I used to be daisy chaining and just unplugging and replugging in, you know, swapping these cables all the time. And so it's such a relief to just have it work. And they go into I have the 5X Tink, and I'm saving up to try for the 4K as well, so then I could have it go to the the TV, but also stream with the 5. It's going to hopefully be great. So I love hearing about how people hook all their stuff up because it's interesting.
Yeah.
I learn a lot, and it can be tricky.
It is tricky, but it's fun. I like doing that. And the way I have it set up now, I can just turn on any device and it just works. I don't have to change any settings. It's all automatic. I mean, I guess if I want to switch between component and RGB, I have to press one button on the PVM to select the input, and that's fine. The B&O is all automatic detection via SCART. So when it detects a SCART signal, it just goes.
That's great.
And then upstairs, I also have more. So in the one area, I have 2 more Sony PVMs up there. One is in vertical mode for Tate, and the other is Yoko and horizontal, and they are side by side. And that's mainly where I use the Mister.
Okay.
But I also have a couple other things up there, like laser discs, the CDI is up there, the Nuon is up there, important stuff like that.
The real good
I also
stuff.
have one of my super guns, the main super gun is up there, and I have like a table so I can use arcade boards directly through that super gun. So that all goes to that setup. And then in the other room, in the guest room, I have another setup where I have the FW900 hooked up with a VGA input. And right now I just have the modded Xbox 360 on there, but you can use other stuff as well. Because obviously that's, you get native output 720p right to that monitor. It looks amazing.
Oh.
It's the best way to play like 360 and PS3. And then if you turn around, I also have another PVM up there with just it's got a twin Famicom on it and a PC Engine. It's just like an extra place to chill if you want, and it's there for any guests that stay.
I was going to say, staying at your place sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, you got that, and then I have 2 other 20-inch PVMs and 2 9-inch ones that are not currently like in use. They're like in the area, but one of them needs repair. Actually, 2 of them need repair, and just, I have enough. I don't have more room for more setups. they're basically backup.
I don't know if your wife would, sounds like, maybe not allow more setups.
No, there's
or
no
be
more
a fan
room.
of.
There's no more room to go from that point. So between all of that, and then, I even have like another second portable Mister setup mounted on my wall where I had some extra space just because why not?
Is that where you have the arcade stick?
Yeah, I have an arcade stick there, and now I'm using an OLED screen with a magnetic back, so I can rotate it just by pulling it off the magnet. And
that sounds pretty cool.
That's also pretty good for Mister, because yes, I have 2 Misters in here, rocking them out. I'm using upstairs. I'm actually using the Mister multi-system that Retro Man Cave and the company I'm forgetting on the name put together. And that is so awesome. Consoleizing the Mister experience into something like that is a huge, huge deal. It makes it much easier to deal with because the standard old school Mister case is just like, yeah, you got ports on every side of this thing, and it just looks horrible.
Yeah, that's one of my. I have a traditional Mister like that. I do have it in the aluminum case for the heat, so I don't have a fan or anything. But
that's good at least.
Yeah, the like one side is up against the shelf, so there's just no USB. I think that's where I put all the short little USB dongles for like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, kind of, so that they're. But it's I've got the cord going to my keyboard, like it's just out and dangling, and if I hook up the snack adapter, and it's just it's not very elegant. But
no, not at all.
Mister's very DIY in that way of just like it just exists.
I mostly just use it for arcade stuff at this point. That's my favorite use case by far. Yeah. That and X68000 and MSX, because I don't have originals of those, so that's really great.
It's been my tool for playing analog consoles that I don't have digital solutions for, and it just feels like the Mister's getting better all the time with the PlayStation Core from, what was that, a year or 2 ago, and now we're getting the N64 core, which I can't believe.
That's honestly nuts.
It's bonkers. So that's been a nice, just fun thing to have as another way to play these things or play stuff. Because for example, I don't have like an ODE for the PlayStation, so I can just play things that I don't have necessarily that way and things like that. So the Mister's great. Mister's fun. I wanted to ask quickly, just how's the Tink 4K been? I talked to Try about it a little bit, but you're the second person I've been able to talk to that's able to, has a prototype and is using it. How has it been to have a true 4K scaler like that?
I would say for the lower res 240p consoles, it's very nice for all the masking and everything you can do and the black frame insertion that it has built in. I mean, it's really, really good. But I wouldn't say it's a complete game changer on that over the 5X. The 5X is still great.
Yeah.
Where it really makes a difference for me is its support of things like VGA input and HDMI input, because it allows for very flexible, high quality scaling of the types of sources the Tink 5X really wasn't designed for. So like, retro PC capturing, for instance, is something that's really important to me. And the Tink 4K does it beautifully. It makes a big difference. It's really, really useful. And then being able to scale 720p games from like older HD consoles, nearest neighbor scaling them to 4K, it's gorgeous. It's exactly what I've wanted. TVs don't do it, but man, is it good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it for things like the PS TV or the Wii U or the PS3 and stuff.
So basically all of that stuff, it basically covers a broader range of use cases that weren't possible on the Tink 5X. And I've wanted for a very long time, and now it's here, which is phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, even if you are using it for the same stuff as the 5X, like just the upgrade in terms of output quality, and when you add in stuff like those, all the new masks and filters and the tweakability of all of that, it's pretty nuts. It's a really great device so far. Mike just really, he's outdone himself. It's truly, the man is a genius.
He is. It's absolutely absurd to see the stuff that he's been able to pull off, and even the things that he's been able to retroactively go back and add to the 5X. Even before the 4K started full development, just what he's been able to squeeze out of the 5X.
And beyond that, he also picks the right people to work with. Like he brought in Mark from Blur Busters to help out on several features.
Yeah.
And Mark is an absolute expert when it comes to anything motion related on displays. Nobody knows more about this stuff than him. And Mike went right to him, and he helped share some of his algorithms and techniques for things like implementing black frame insertion, the pull down, the 2x2 pull down technique, which actually allows, like, say 30 frames per second interlaced content to behave as if it were actually progressive. In a very simple explanation, but
break it way down.
But it's really, really cool, all those features. So the Tink is just in a great spot.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm very, very excited to save up and get one eventually and add it to the setup, and then have it, for now, be what I want until I get something else that makes me want to do something.
It's hard to imagine, like, them going much further than this, though. That's the thing.
On the scaling side, yeah, I can't.
It's going to take something else to like, there's not much more you can do. I think the only thing I would add on top of it is what Dan and them are doing with the direct HDMI mods.
Yeah.
On consoles, like, that stuff is combining that actually is really interesting, but basically being able to get that perfect digital output from a console, that
like you
eliminating the analog from it completely is really awesome.
I remember you shared a picture of Metal Gear Solid 2. You were using the gem on the PS2 into the Tink. And
exactly.
I think you had shared that right around the time that Konami confirmed that it was basically just 1080p, I think, for Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 in the collection.
It's 720.
Oh, it's 720. I thought that was just Switch. It's 720 across the board.
No, it's 720. It's scaled. They actually have a little asterisk where it's scaled up to 1080p.
I remember. Okay, so that was what was happening.
I've seen direct capture from PS5, and it's just 720.
Oh boy,
it's the same as the PS3 and 360 HD collection, which tells me that they just had what Bluepoint produced, and they couldn't modify it much.
Yeah.
And maybe they just built a wrapper around that port.
Makes me wonder what they're going to do with 4. Assuming there is a Master Collection Volume 2 and it has Metal Gear Solid 4 in it, how they would get that off PS3, I guess. It's the only one.
Exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, the Metal Gear Solid 2 screenshots that you shared off of a PS2, pure digital signal into a 4K upscale, it looks immaculate. It's amazing. So I guess that's what's next. Digitize everything.
Absolutely. Oh, man.
There was kind of one more ranging topic I wanted to talk to you about, because I feel a lot the same way as you do, I think. And I've been a little frustrated lately. And I think you have been too. But the physical media feels like it's going away. And just more and more stories come out and happen and bum me out. Like Alan Wake 2 or the Like a Dragon Gaiden games. Those are digital only. So they're going to be straight digital to home consoles without physical releases. Up until Limited Run, for example, just announced their physical versions of Persona 3 and 4. Those were digital only from Atlas. But then we have consoles shutting down digital stores. Like the 3DS and Wii U just shut down this year. 360, I think, is next year. Things are just disappearing, it feels like. And how are you feeling about all this?
I mean, I don't like it, obviously. It's not great. I mean, I think... So the thing about... It's more than just preservation, right? I wouldn't say physical media really by itself is actually what I would consider true preservation. True preservation is actually digital, but a non-DRM version of the game that can be saved and stored and archived.
Yeah. That
is what we need for actual preservation. But of course, you're not going to get that with console stores because they are proprietary. Unless the console is hacked, that's also a problem. So like the Xbox stuff, Xbox One, for instance, and up, it has not been hacked as far as I know. Which, good on their security, but for the future, it could be bad.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's... I do worry about that kind of stuff just disappearing. The closure of these sort of like bespoke console stores. Like so far, it hasn't been a disaster simply because of, well, the pirates. They've had to once again save the day as always. And in terms of, downloading this stuff and making it available. It sucks that that's the only way that we can kind of get there, But that's kind of where we're at right now. And it shouldn't have to be that way. But there's a risk of that becoming more difficult as we go forward. And that's the concern.
Yeah. There are some, like, at least temporary glimpses of hope. Recently, PlayStation just revealed the revision to the PS5 Slim, I suppose.
Yeah.
I guess it's PS5 Slim is what the community will call it. But I think maybe everyone assumed this. I'm not sure. I assumed at least that detachable drive that was rumored was going to be external, and in fact, it seems to be an internal sort of. You just kind of plug it in on the inside and then put a plate over it, which turns it into a PS5 with a disk drive, which seems really cool.
Yeah.
But, they clearly, it's just one SKU that they're producing and stuff, right? And
in this case, after seeing the way they implemented it, I get the feeling it's more about simplifying manufacturing than anything else.
Like they just have one SKU they're making.
Yeah. They make one box and one drive. And you can either sell them together or not, but like there's not two separate machines that need to be made. And I think that is obviously going to be a money saving on the manufacturing side. We'll see what actually happens because it is still effectively being sold the same way the current PS5 is, where you have the main version with the disk drive built in, only it's, now detachable, but it's effectively built in. And then you have the digital one. And the difference now is you can add the drive to the digital one. Yeah. So I have some concerns, but it doesn't seem as bad as I had feared.
Compare that to the leaks from Microsoft with the FTC files, and there's, at least at one point, a vision of digitizing the Series X completely, and making it adorably all digital, making it look like just a cylinder. There was a quote in those slides, I went through them yesterday, and obviously this is just internal marketing speak. It's not an actual quote from a user, but the quote was, "Xbox has made buying games digitally as easy and affordable as disc. Plus, I can play those games on multiple devices I already own, xCloud streaming, blah, blah, blah. I don't miss my disc drive at all," which I don't feel like anyone would talk like that, in the sense of,
nope,
people have been able to buy their collections digitally basically from the dawn of the PS4 and Xbox One. So if someone wanted to go digital all the way, they've been doing that for the last decade. I don't know about as affordable as discs. I would think it depends on the timing, I guess, because eventually digital games just get so cheap and on sale all the time.
I don't believe that.
You don't? No?
On Steam, maybe you sometimes get those crazy sales, but on the console space,
not the big ones. That's fair.
Like, you don't see that many. Like, and this is probably why they would want them physical to go away, because these things get cheap. You know, basically, physical console games sort of have this like curve to them where they start out expensive, they sink down to like dirt cheap, and then they get expensive again in many cases. Not all of them, right? But like, you buy a lot of these things used, or just, you know, after they've been out for a while, and it's super low price. And you go to the actual official store and the price is not so good. I just saw someone post, it was actually Jez Corden, post that Battlefield 2042 is $69.99 on the Xbox store right now.
Oh my gosh.
And Battlefield 2042 is $7 on Amazon right now.
I mean, that you're absolutely right about that.
Physically, the physical disc version, right? So like, why is that still $69.99 on the Xbox store? Like, that's not going to happen with the in-game disc version. It has been sold. It's obviously on sale right now, but it's been sold for so much less for so long. And like, if you take that away, and what incentive do they ever have to really drop prices outside of very specific sales?
This is true. Yeah. So about that though, these physical games being cheaper, right, for certain periods, and then years later they'll become more expensive. Like, I saw a copy of Wii Sports for $40 one day. It's like, what? Why? They were everywhere. But then you have examples. I think of Halo Infinite, and I'm actually very curious if Forza Motorsport is actually on the disc all the way, but
it's not.
Oh, gosh. See, so then you're still dependent on a digital version, essentially, and the disc is just acting like a key.
Yeah. So frankly, at this point, I'll just say, like, when it comes to Xbox, I feel like the battle is lost. Like, they are their services company. Most of the fans that are into Xbox, they don't care about discs, and they push back against it anyway. They're happy with Game Pass. They're happy with everything else there, and that's totally fine. I have nothing against that at all. But given that that is the primary audience, it seems, on the Xbox, I don't think there's that many people left that actually even care about this stuff. They have successfully made it so that most people aren't going to really care about getting discs on their platform, which is, I think that's what they've wanted. They'll make more money that way for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's it does suck. And it definitely, for some of us, like, I have a lot of, Xbox 360, Xbox One games on disc, things like backwards compatibility. Most of my backwards compatibility playtime, it's dependent on these discs, right? Mm-hmm. So like, their platform suddenly goes all digital. It's like, well, I can't use this anymore, which feels like a step back. It's just, I understand them not focusing on it, but getting rid of it entirely really annoys me. And I think that's going to have an impact, because I do still think, to some degree at least, having a presence in stores does matter. Mm-hmm. Like, it does sort of color people's impressions of these things in a way that I think is important. If you're completely digital and you basically get chased out of stores or barely present in them, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be great for them either. Mm-hmm. Especially, just coming back from Japan where like physical media is huge, and it's not about collecting. It's just availability and pricing more than anything, I would say, because games are everywhere. They are really easy to find. And the prices do drop more on the physical stuff pretty quickly, especially if you buy used. Japanese used is basically like, American GameStop. Well, it's actually, it's Japanese used is better than the unshrink wrapped GameStop new, I would say. But
I can imagine.
But, yeah, like, I don't know. It just feels like cutting off some of their audience for no reason. Like, yes, the majority are probably happy with digital, but I don't know. It's once they go down this path, it feels like that's it. There's no going back, and the discs are just dead for the Xbox at that point, if that happens. But thankfully, this was a leak. This thing, it's 3 years or 4 years, however long ago this thing was being discussed. I guess it would be less than that, given when the Series X came out. But maybe this gives them pause. Yeah, they haven't officially announced it, right? Like maybe maybe we should actually not do the all digital thing. Who knows? But we'll see.
I'm hopeful that they can pivot at least in some way. Maybe an external detachable drive at the very least, like provide an option for now. I suppose we'll see. I am happy to see Sony at least for now sticking with it. Horizon Forbidden West is coming on 2 discs, the complete version of it, and Final Fantasy VII, same deal. So they're at least keeping the disc-based versions alive, which is
at least when they release the disc version, it's like a complete game that you can install and play. And yeah, some games need patches, absolutely, but I think that's actually not true for the majority. Like the patches can be like quality of life things, but what you have on the disc is perfectly fine. And if years later you need to get back into it and play it, it's ready to go. Yeah. I hate dealing with the digital stuff if you had a console in a closet for like 2 or 3 years and you pull it out, it's just a nightmare.
Oh, I can't. The updates alone probably are obnoxious.
Yeah, it ain't good.
Ugh. I was surprised to hear you remark that physical is very alive over in Japan.
Oh yeah.
I always hear about it. I've never been, but I always hear that space is so valuable. So I guess I've just inferred that physical would be less popular in that market. But you were just there, and it sounds like stuff was everywhere.
Yeah, the sheer number of them, it's impressive. And like I said, I don't think it's mostly about collecting games. I think it's more about like availability, because it's like you just walk anywhere and you're just going to pass a shop that has a game that you might want. Like it's all over the place. It's very easy. Like even the day I flew out is when Ease 10 came out, and sure enough, just the game comes out that morning, and I just go to a store at the airport and they had it. They had all the versions. They had the extra merch, all that stuff. It's like, all right. You normally don't find that at airports in the US, where you just can find like a game comes out and on release day, it's at the airport store, right?
You can barely find that at a Target here.
That's what I mean. So like that's how it goes on that front. And I think it really is just that availability factor. And then that's why there's a big used market there as well, because people are buying games, selling them back, and it's cheaper in the long run than just buying digital and eating the cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hopeful that stuff will stay around for maybe another generation, but it does seem like we're just staring down the barrel of an all digital platform going forward. I hope whatever Switch 2, Super Switch, I hope it has a physical component.
I do too. I think Nintendo would be extremely dumb to get rid of that, because their physical market is big.
When I go to a Target, for example, the Xbox and PlayStation part of those aisles are pretty barren. Not just the consoles, but the games on the shelves or whatever. But the Nintendo section is always full.
Yeah, I found it's interesting how that varies. Like, because I visited these shops in Japan, Europe, and multiple countries in Europe and the US. And the US is the worst in this regard, where like the console sections are mostly pitiful. Switch has the most for sure, but there's barely anything left. It feels it's really like shocking. Europe, the stores are still like here in Germany, especially like the stores are still pretty packed with stuff. Switch and PlayStation definitely have the largest sections for sure. Xbox has definitely shrunk in recent years with the rise of the digital stuff. PC has a surprisingly large retail presence here. Germany's like one of the only countries left where PC games have a big retail presence.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Like, it's really wild. Like, it's surprising actually how much has going on. Now, you know, some of them are special German disc versions. Others are just codes in a box. But either way, there's still retail stuff happening, which is cool.
Yeah. Makes me happy to hear it. At least it's in other places.
And if you like simulators, you know, bow simulators, you like your farming simulator, all that kind of stuff. Like it's no joke. They actually do have like dedicated sections just for that stuff. They're very popular here.
Okay. This explains those Nintendo Directs where it was just farming simulator after farming simulator.
Well, those are more like farming games, like Harvest Moon. I'm talking about the hardcore, like the simulators, like the simulator. Like, you know, the farming simulator, construction simulator, train simulator, you know, like fire truck simulator, all that kind of stuff, like airport simulator. It's that type of thing.
Oh, that's the sim, the big sim. That's so are there like rigs and stuff too to buy with it? Like, here's your tractor controller or your semi truck steering.
Yes, 100%. They do have the farming simulator controller. It's got like a wheel with the little peg sticking out so you can kind of wheel it around quickly. It straight up has that. Those are actually in the shops, and it's awesome. Hilarious and awesome.
That is so cool.
That's basically the German equivalent of like Densha to Go, you know, where it's like you got the train controller there. It's like here we've got the farming simulator controller.
That's so cool. I never would have thought that or known that. That feels like a story like someone should explore.
It's big enough where I've been to like a media markt before. They had a giant multi-screen setup and a big cockpit chair to sit into, and then they have the tractor controller, and like you climb in and basically driving their giant tractor setup at the store.
Wow, that's so cool. I would totally hop in that. If I was at the shop, I would definitely sit down and try it out. Because I'm not going to have that at home. I don't have the room for that. That's so neat. Well, thank you so much, John, for taking time out of your day to talk to me about all this stuff. I've had a real blast chatting with you today. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm happy to join. It was a good time.
Where can the people can find your work at Digital Foundry. I mean, that's not really a question.
Correct.
Spider-Man video just came out.
Yeah, that came out. Other things. So yeah, I mean, you know, I'm on all the social medias at the Dark One X still. Good. Also be sure to go on Steam and wishlist RZ, the Jewel of Faramore.
Yes, the CDI looking game.
Yes, I got to do some design work on that, and it's my buddy Seth's first full big game production, and it's really cool.
Okay.
So show some love, people.
All right.
We need to make it a success.
Well, there will be links to that and everything else in the show notes. If you'd like to find more of my work, you could head over to maxfrequency.net for my writing. You could check out my other show, Chapter Select, where we take a series and bounce back and forth through its entries, exploring their evolution, design, and legacy. Right now, we're in Season 6, which is covering the mainline Pokemon games, so those episodes are coming out. And then we've got Metroid Prime and Castlevania coming up for next year as well, so you can go check that show out as well. But until next time, thank you all so much for listening, and adios.